Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Marissa Chun, and on behalf of PPIC's Board of Directors, we are really grateful to be able to welcome you to this program today. We are so excited to have the privilege of hosting somebody whose life story and whose leadership has been an inspiration to so many of us, San Francisco Mayor London Breed. Thank you so much, Mayor Breed, for joining us today for this very important program. This event is part of PPIC's 2019 Speaker Series on California's future. We would like to thank the many sponsors of this series for their underwriting support. These organizations are listed here on the screen and on the back of your programs. The series is funded also by the PPIC Donor Circle and our PPIC Corporate Circle. These are groups of individuals and organizations whose generous support to PPIC makes today's program and other programs like this available to the public free of charge, both in person and online. So we ask that you consider joining us as a sponsor and supporting PPIC's mission so that we can continue to have these really healthy and wonderful dialogues that help improve California's public policy. Before we begin, a couple of housekeeping items for everybody. First of all, we here at PPIC always like to get better, and so you will be receiving an email later today with a short survey. We would ask that you consider taking a few moments to let us know how we did today. And secondly, I would ask that everybody take this moment to silence their cell phones so that we can listen to this wonderful conversation. So now on to the program. I'm pleased to introduce PPIC's President and CEO, Mark Baldassare, who will moderate today's conversation with Mayor Breed. Mark, on to you.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Marissa, for that nice introduction. And thanks to all of you for joining us at lunchtime. Those of you who were able to have lunch with us, I hope it was delicious and, set you up for this great conversation we're going to have. And remember that we have dessert waiting outside for us at 1:30. So hope you save some room for that. It's my honor and privilege to introduce Mayor London Breed, who has a very, very impressive resume. And for those of you who are thinking about a successful career in public service, I suggest that you study Mayor Breed's resume, because you'll notice that about a decade of service in city government, both with Mayor Brown and Mayor Newsom, and you'll also notice degrees coming from UC Davis in political science and public administration from the University of San Francisco, all leading to the moment when she became a member of the Board of Supervisors, elected in 2012 and beginning in 2013. And then her colleagues elected her as the president of the Board of Supervisors in 2015, a role which she served in until she became the acting mayor in 2017, and then ran for mayor in the special election 9 months ago and was elected mayor, making history in San Francisco as the first African-American woman elected mayor of San Francisco. We haven't met before, and we were talking briefly before we came on stage, and I mentioned to Mayor Breed that Mayor Breed is making history here at PPIC in our 25th year, because Mayor Breed is the first current mayor of San Francisco who's visiting us and part of one of our programs. So thank you for taking the time to join us today. It took us 25 years, but thank you for accepting our invitation and joining us. So we're going to have questions from the audience in about 40 minutes or so. And there's one question that Mayor Breed and I shared in advance, which will start us off, and then we'll go in different directions and in some depth from that first question. But So you've been mayor for 9 months, and here we are in 2019. And as you look at the landscape of all the things that you need to accomplish, can you tell us what 2 or 3 challenges that the city faces that you plan to take action on in 2019?
Well, it is no secret that homelessness is one of the biggest challenges that's facing our city, and that also comes with the need to build more housing. So those have been the main focuses of my administration since the beginning, and I'm really proud of what we've already done, even though we know that there's more to be done. We've been able to get, since I've been in office, over 1,000 people off the streets, reconnected with their family members, into shelters, into permanent supportive housing. I mean, it has been really a process. I've been very hands-on in understanding that process and how we can make it more efficient in order to help support people that we know are struggling on our streets, and discovering that it is a lot more complicated than just providing someone a place to stay. People who unfortunately are suffering from mental health issues and substance abuse disorder has been really two of the things that I've been really focused on for the purposes of trying to get people the help and the support that they need, so that when we are able to transition someone into housing, that they're able to keep their housing unit, which has been sadly a bit of a challenge. But ultimately helping the folks that we've been able to help, the success stories are absolutely amazing and exciting to watch someone who had been homeless for years not only go through the process of getting into a shelter bed, but then being able to get their own unit with their own bathroom. The work that goes into really supporting our homeless population is incredible, but we know that it's not nearly enough to deal with the bigger challenge of homelessness, not just in San Francisco, but throughout the entire state of California. The need to build more housing is critical to our ability to provide places for people to live. So I've been on a mission. I hired a housing delivery director, someone whose sole purpose is to cut back on bureaucratic red tape that gets in the way of building housing. Everyone wants us to build more housing, but as soon as we try to build it in some neighborhoods throughout San Francisco, we're met with a lot of opposition. And so every neighborhood in San Francisco has to share in on an increase in housing units. Really is the only way that we're going to be able to, get to a better place. And I say that, that as a native San Franciscan, I also know that there comes a responsibility to maintain neighborhood character. And people love their neighborhoods, they love their communities, and we don't want to change San Francisco into a place where there are high-rises everywhere. But it's not unreasonable to expect to build, a little bit taller in neighborhoods, anywhere between 4 or 5 and sometimes 6 stories, where it typically may not be zoned for that particular purpose. I tell so many people in San Francisco on the West Side, especially because so many of them grew up in San Francisco and maybe raised their families here. I asked, do your kids still live here? And in most instances, no, because their kids can't afford to live here. So many of my friends who grew up in San Francisco can't afford to live here. And I think it's because we have not produced enough housing. And so I'm committed to doing that. I'm also committed to changing some of our laws to get housing built faster. Yes, there are things that we would propose to the Board of Supervisors to get rid of redundant laws or things that are getting in the way and creating problems. But I plan to take my case to the voters to get support on a housing bond for 100% affordable housing for low, moderate, and middle income residents, to build affordable housing, 100% affordable housing, and 100% teacher housing as of right, so that people can't block this much needed housing in neighborhoods if they're following all of the required laws under the code. So really all hands on deck response to building more housing and addressing all of these issues, and also pushing for creative solutions and less redundancy with our bureaucracy, because I think that's been what's held us hostage. I mean, I just cut the ribbon last week on a project for 100% affordable housing for families, and it took 11 years. from the time that they found the site to the whole process, to the funding, to the permitting, to the drama. And, I can go on, and enough is enough. These projects, especially when we have land, and especially when we have financial support to build them, should not take so long because of our bureaucratic process. And I am determined to cut the red tape for our small businesses, our housing, how we are able to provide shelter beds for people who are unfortunately homeless, because I think that we have piled so many laws on top of laws on top of laws that we have just put ourselves in a situation where we're not going to be as successful with addressing these challenges unless we start getting rid of some of this stuff.
Thank you. So let's go back to homelessness for a moment, and then I want to ask you about housing, and then maybe we'll move on to a few other issues. But when I think about the challenges of making progress in the area of homelessness, I think about, as you mentioned, the connection between homelessness, for some, not all, but for some, a substantial number, and mental health and substance abuse. And I think about the fact that you've got to have programs that people can go to. You've got to have a willingness to go to those programs and stay in them. The programs have to work, right? And there has to be, you have to stick with those programs. That these are things that it's taken some time to get, in the situation where you need that kind of help, and you're going to need some help. So when other mayors either in San Francisco or other big cities have said, I'm going to take care of homelessness, it hasn't always worked, and it's been around these programs. And so how do you look at the mental health and substance abuse programs differently?
Yeah, and part of it is making the hard decision and just accepting the fact that, since the beginning of time, we know, sadly, people suffer from mental illness. People have suffered from various addictions. And how are we going to deal with it differently? It's not going to go away because we don't want to see it. And so part of it is just looking at our healthcare system differently so that we can provide real solutions to help people, especially someone struggling with mental illness. Part of my support is for Senator Scott Wiener's bill, SB 1045, which is, as we speak, been introduced as a different bill to be reworked to provide a lot more stricter guidelines around conservatorships. So that is when someone who unfortunately can't make decisions for themselves is provided with a guardian who is able to make decisions for them. And it's, of course, a very controversial thing because you talk about taking away someone's rights. And I think the problem that we have now in San Francisco and other places throughout California is our jails are being used as a mental health facility. And that's not a solution. And we have to think about this challenge differently, and we have to make hard decisions if we want to help people that we know, that we see. We all see them, they're struggling, and then we wonder why the police come or they get picked up by a paramedic, and then they're probably on a 72-hour hold, and then they're right back in the same location dealing with the same challenges. And I am very supportive of strengthening our conservatorship laws. In fact, since I've been mayor, we've opened 50 new mental health stabilization beds, and we're going to be opening another 100 this year. So increasing our capacity, changing our laws, and really making the hard decisions for people who unfortunately can't make decisions for themselves. The goal is not to institutionalize people permanently, but it's to try and understand how we could help someone live a productive life. We deal with physical challenges in that way, where you break a leg, you go to the hospital, you get a cast, you know what the steps are to get there. But when we talk about mental illness, it's a lot more complex, a lot more challenging than that. And so I want to look at mental health from a broader perspective here in San Francisco like we never have before, starting with hiring under our Department of Public Health a new mental health director, someone whose sole purpose is to just reform how we address the challenges that exist with mental illness, whether it's someone suffering from schizophrenia, someone who has dementia, or someone who sadly psychosis is caused because of their drug use. We have to have real solutions that will help support various populations in their mental health challenges, because I just think that we're a little bit all over the place right now, and I want us to, address those issues, organize things a lot better for the purposes of helping people. And yes, the tough decision of making decisions through the courts, of course, making decisions for someone who clearly cannot make unfortunately, a decision for themselves. So yes, it's somewhat controversial, but I am hopeful that for a small percentage of the homeless population, this will make a real difference. The other thing that I'm proposing is quite controversial, is safe injection sites. And there's still some legal challenges that we're dealing with, but my whole point is, again, people who sadly suffer from drug use, and they need treatment. But just because you want them to get treatment today doesn't mean that they're going to seek treatment today. But where are the options when they're ready to seek treatment? And so coming with some new solutions like safe injection sites, which provide treatment on demand, and we have, through our Department of Public Health, a number of our health officials who are able to provide support to those who are suffering from addiction, who are on our streets right on demand. Treatment on demand is something we have to start looking at, ways to give people an alternative to drug use, especially if they tell you, hey, I'm ready, I need support, I need help. And we have to provide real solutions to get people into treatment and meet them where they are. So I think my approach is more from my experiences of kind of living in it and seeing how all the good intentions, because there are a lot of great people who are working on these issues, but I do think we need to take some risk and propose some things that may make people uncomfortable, but ultimately may help us to get the kind of results that will not just make a difference with what people see on the streets, but make a difference in someone's life. And change someone's life for the better.
Affordable housing in San Francisco is a pretty tall order these days, right? And how do you, given what the costs are for housing today in San Francisco, how do you think about, measuring progress and defining success over the next few years? Just given how expensive it is in San Francisco now.
And the sad reality is we have over 70,000 units that are just waiting to be built here in our city that still would need to go through process and a number of other challenges, both affordable and market rate and various units. And I set a goal of trying to at least at the minimum produce another 5,000 units every year. But also, there's also a real strong need for rehabilitation of existing affordable housing, specifically because of the dilapidated conditions of so many of our public housing units in San Francisco. And so balancing all of that takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of money, and it also takes a long-term plan. Because what I want to see us do is not, again, continue to let the bureaucracy get in our way. And in fact, there are some new pieces of legislation being proposed by the board as we speak that are going to add additional layers that would make building more affordable housing challenging, or building more housing in general, I'm sorry, not affordable housing, challenging. And so trying to work with them to help them understand we don't need more bureaucracy, we need less, and we need to remove some of those barriers so that we can get many of these housing units built in the first place. Today, I'm really excited that we're going to be cutting the ribbon on a new 100% affordable family housing development where we once had a navigation center on Mission and 16th, and it took a few years to get this done, but it's coming, and 40 of those units will go to homeless families. And so I think part of what we have to do is, and this is a part of the goal of the housing delivery director who I hired, is working on, yes, the larger developments like the one that's happening. The San Francisco Giants is doing 1,400 units, and we have a number of other projects that are delayed, unfortunately, as a result of our process. But the goal is to try and get these projects moving as quickly as possible, because just imagine if all of a sudden there's like 70,000 additional units in the pool in San Francisco alone, how amazing that could be for housing in general. And so my goal is to try and get as many units produced as possible through our small size acquisition program to purchase rent-controlled buildings where those buildings are being at risk of being lost with a lot of low-income individuals and families, doing very creative things to rehab public housing, and really investing our money in the right places so that we can have long-term impacts on people's lives with housing in general, and working with our regional partners. Because San Francisco, we can't do this by ourselves. We are not the only city with homeless challenges, with housing challenges. This is a problem throughout the entire state of California, where 24% of the homeless population in the whole United States of America is right here in California. And LA is really experiencing some major challenges, and they passed a tax in order to help provide support for their homeless population. But again, the money is one thing. It's investing in the right resources and the support, and also being consistent in what we provide that's going to really help with this issue. And it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a lot of work.
So I've been following San Francisco mayor's politics and policy for about 30 years. First polling I did in San Francisco was in 1987, when Mayor Feinstein was mayor, and then Art Agnos was elected mayor. And one thing that I was going all the way back 30 years, and I think it's true today, one of the big challenges for San Francisco mayors is always the tension between neighborhoods and city government. And you've alluded to it a couple of times, both in housing. And I'm trying to get a sense of how you try to deal with that tension, and how do you try to engage neighborhoods when there is there's been historically very prominent NIMBYism, that I would call it, in the city.
Yeah, and it's tough, because on the one hand, you really sympathize and understand, that there are people who have concerns, serious concerns. So for example, Seawall Lot 330 along the waterfront, where I'm proposing a 200-bed safe center, navigation center for homeless individuals. It's a very controversial thing for the people who live there, who feel that, very strongly, they have serious concerns about bringing a shelter to that particular area. And from my perspective, I understand the concerns, but at the same time, everyone wants the mayor to fix the problem. And I am proposing solutions. And a homeless shelter has to go somewhere. I mean, there's one 2 blocks from where I live. They're going to have to be somewhere. And I know people are frustrated, but the goal is to provide a safe place for them to be, a place where they're getting support, they're getting wraparound services, they can be there 24 hours, they can sleep there, and they can eat, and with the goal of not making them comfortable. It's really about trying to get them help, and they have to go somewhere. And so this is a place where there's an opportunity where it actually works. This is a parking lot that's being used for parking, and has the ability to really help us here in the city for the next couple of years be a space that we're able to provide people with shelter. And so just balancing those kinds of conversations are difficult.
So how do you go about doing that?
Well, there's been a number of community meetings, and that's where you hear where people voice their concerns as to why they want something or they don't want anything. But I will tell you what's been helpful too is the fact that we had the same challenge with a navigation center in the dog patch, where the people who lived in that area didn't want the navigation center, and most recently they agreed to allow the term of the contract to be extended because they're happy with the way that it had been handled. And just like with safe injection sites and other things, you know, part of it is we need to give these things a chance. We need to give them a try. And if they're not working, or if something goes wrong, or if there's an issue, then I can understand, you know, but for now, this is a real solution to what we know is a real problem. There are a lot of homeless people all over San Francisco, along the waterfront, and in all neighborhoods throughout the city. And there is a need to make sure that we have places for people to go. And this is an opportunity to provide that. And, you know, when you're an elected official, you make some people happy and some people you may not make happy. And you know, like as a native San Franciscan, as someone who loves the city, I want to see the city get better. And I want to see us make the right investments. And part of that means that I have to make the hard decisions to do what could get us to that better place. And that's, you know, unfortunately sometimes challenging in these roles.
One of the other things that's very unique about San Francisco, nowhere else in California do you have city and county government in managing the same geography. And you've been the president of the Board of Supervisors, you're mayor now. What's your working relationship with the Board of Supervisors?
It's tough. You know, it's tough, but I have great relationships with a lot of the members on the board. And I think what we've been able to do, even within my short time as mayor, is find common ground.
Where do you find common ground?
So you talk, you talk. So just like, for example, there were some major issues that we worked together on, like the project labor agreement with the building trades. We got that after years. We sat down, members of the board, members of the labor community, the minority business community. We hashed it out for hours. And I basically made it, I said, we are not, I don't want to hear about this again. We are going to solve it. So you guys, they sat in the room like for, I think, 12 hours straight until we came to an agreement.
All 11 of them?
Not 11, it was just 2 members of the board. But they,
representing everyone else.
Yeah, they kind of led the kind of efforts. And so that was one of the things that we accomplished, including a minimum compensation ordinance that we sat in the room and went over hours of negotiation for in-home support services workers, the budget. Just recently, you heard about the windfall of money that the city received, and I pretty much got my way, but I had to compromise a little bit with the board. And part of it is, you know, you don't just, you know, draw a line in the sand. You got to be willing to compromise. I mean, I won't compromise my values, but at the same time, you know, I work with members of the board, my staff works with members of the board, and ultimately I try to continue to find ways in which, you know, we agree. Like if they have a piece of legislation, I'm like, okay, well, can we just make certain changes to that legislation? Or if I completely disagree, then I'm very upfront about why. So I think communication is really important to maintaining a good relationship, even when we have disagreements. And for the most part, I don't think it's been so bad. The news folks are looking for things to create. They're like looking for something. But ultimately, you know, we care about really focusing our attention on making good decisions for the city. And I don't think it does our city a good service to be at each other's throats and distracting from what we know are really important issues because of personality conflicts.
And you alluded to earlier the fact that housing and homelessness, and this goes for transportation as well and jobs, none of these things, pay attention to city boundaries. These are all regional issues. So where are you finding common ground, and who are your partners in the region?
And that's the thing. I used to be a member of the Board of Supervisors, so I was very, as a fighter for District 5, I fought for my district. Yeah. But as a San Franciscan and as president of the board, I kind of looked at a bigger picture. So for example, when the police chief took one of my beloved captains from Park Police Station and moved him to Bayview, I was like so mad, but I was like, okay, Bayview needs him more right now, and I supported that. And I think it's important to look at, of course, the bigger picture in terms of the decisions that get made. And it's difficult trying to sometimes get members of the board to do that. Mm-hmm. And I remember being being that same person. But I also think that what I appreciate, so for example, with a lot of the ERAF money that we received, a lot of it was mostly went to go support, just a few districts in particular. And the respect and the for supporting that compromise from so many members of the board, even though their district might not have been getting anything directly, the city was still winning because we got hundreds of new units for affordable housing, hundreds of new shelter beds, and it meant it was a win-win for the city as a whole rather than everyone focusing on, well, I want my piece of the pie. And so that continues to be, it will continue to be a challenge, but we also can't neglect, certain parts of our city that feel that they deserve better muni service, they deserve more beat officers. The commercial corridors of their communities are experiencing a number of challenges. So we can't neglect, the west side of our city and south east sector of our city and other places that feel like, well, we deserve resources too. And so it's really about making sure we make the right investments and touch every part of the city.
And who are the other mayors that you're in contact with in the region that you feel like, you have a working partnership with?
So I have a great working relationship with so many of the Bay Area mayors, and they are so good about reaching out, and we communicate regularly with one another, including Sam Liccardo and Libby Schaff, and Daryl Steinberg in Sacramento, and Michael Tubbs in Stockton. It's a great network that we have in terms of asking one another question, well, what's going on with this? How did you get this done? How did you do neighborhood preference? What happened when you did this? And so there's open lines of communication, ways that we coordinate with one another on some of the challenges that we face, especially because we know that housing and homelessness are things that we're going to have to be able to work together on if we're going to address those issues. And so I have great relationships with so many wonderful mayors throughout the Bay Area, and even Eric Garcetti and others, and he's in LA and others.
Even with the Warriors moving to San Francisco. Huh?
Yeah, well, I will tell you, I tell Mayor Schaaf that, this happened before I was mayor. But I was on the Board of Supervisors, but it's.
But on a more serious note, I am.
Hey, she got to keep the Raiders, right?
Right.
For one more season.
So on a more serious note, Mayor Steinberg, a year ago today, one of the citizens of Sacramento killed by 2 policemen. Mm-hmm. And police community relations, as well as police behavior. It's been a major topic, not just in Sacramento, but elsewhere. Did Mayor Steinberg reach out to you, ask for any advice on, given that this is a topic that when you were on the Board of Supervisors, you dealt with?
Yeah, and we've had conversations, and specifically, it's interesting because so many cities reach out to San Francisco about, where we are with our reforms. On the Department of Justice made 272 recommendations to provide reforms to our department, and we are doing really well with getting a significant number of those recommendations done, including our de-escalation training, including anti-bias training, and a number of other things that are necessary in order to make sure that we have the right policies in place to prevent, the officer-involved shootings that have been questioned in the past from continuing to happen. One of the things that I'm most proud of is the work that I've done in the Western Addition community around public safety. I grew up in a neighborhood where, when I was growing up, we didn't have relationships with the police. We didn't talk to the police. And over time, when I was working at the African American Art and Culture Complex, we had a captain there who just was determined to really develop better relationships with our community, especially because, sadly, at that time, we were dealing with really horrible violence where people that I grew up with were, sadly killing one another. And it was a really tough time in the Western Addition and the Bayview, and the homicide rate was really out of control. And so this captain really started working with our community. And I got to tell you, it was not easy. Like the first couple of years, the tension when the police would show up to our events and our programs. And really it was about trying to develop a relationship so that, the police knew the community and the community knew the police because of the challenges that we were dealing with. And over the years, initially a lot of these young people that I used to work with, the first year it was brutal. It was really, I won't even tell you about some of the things our kids did, but ultimately, what's so great over the years, because at first they wouldn't even speak to the officers, and eventually they give them a little head nod, and eventually a little fist bump. I mean, it took years to get to a point where you see now some of these kids who are adults and some of the officers who are still in the Western Addition, and the relationship, it's like they give hugs. It's like love there. The ladies love McBride, they love Barron, they love, there's officers that have these incredible relationships that took years to build. And part of making sure that we have, better relationships between our officers and our community, it takes, developing a relationship and being around when there isn't even a crime that's been committed. Like our backpack giveaways, our health fairs, they would come in and have honest conversations with the kids, hard conversations, where kids, had no filter with asking certain questions, and the officers would answer those questions. Over time, with keeping those doors open, that's really how you really change, relationships between communities that typically may not feel comfortable with police officers and the police department. But yes, the 272 recommendations by the Department of Justice have been extremely helpful. And because of that work, we've seen a lot of, we haven't seen the challenges that had existed in the past in San Francisco that once were. And I really think that we have a department that's moving in the right direction, and people are reaching out to us on a regular basis to find out, well, what are you doing? How are you doing it? And it is work. It is a lot of work because you have to take people off duty, of course, to go through the training process. But the good news is, with our new academy classes, it's already a part, of the new academy classes. So really changing the culture, changing how we provide training, and doing it on the front end in order to make sure that part of it is, yes, it's training, but the other part of it is community. So the cadet program, the folks who are in the academy classes, part of their class is their experience with going out and participate in programs in the neighborhoods. That's from day one. It's embedded into their training. And so I think those kinds of relationships are going to help us get to a better place, and I'm hopeful that eventually we will get to a place in this country where, this is no longer an issue.
So as the mayor, you're not actually in charge of any of the public schools, but the public doesn't always see it like that. And Mayor Schaaf dealt with a strike in Oakland, Mayor Garcetti, a strike in Los Angeles. You're a product of the public schools in San Francisco,
Yes.
an honor student.
Yes,
in
on
high school.
occasion.
How do you see the school system in San Francisco today? What do you think of it, and what needs to be done?
Well, I think that, I'm concerned about some of our lowest performing schools. Mostly, many of those schools are in the Bayview Hunters Point community, where, our kids are not doing as well as in other schools in other neighborhoods. I think that there's a real challenge here, and I meet with the superintendent regularly. I have a person who's focused on education policy, because I can't even imagine that I'd even be here if it weren't for, my teachers and my counselors. And believe it or not, I was a piece of work when I was, in school, and so I would get sent to Miss Carvello's office all the time, and I'd go in there, and Miss Carvello, wasn't me this time. But Miss Carvello was there. We had counselors, we had support, we had we had, from what I feel, we had, it just seemed more wraparound support, so that when we were, when there was bad behavior, there was some level of accountability, but then there was conversation. And there was really an expectation. Like, for example, I didn't want to disappoint Ms. Carvello, even though I wanted to go hang out and talk to her. I still didn't want to disappoint her. So usually I just pop in and say hi, and I tried to stay out of trouble. But she was, our counselor. And the goal is to have, to prepare us, when we're dealing with some of the challenges that we deal with. She was the person that we would have appointments with to kind of talk about things. And I think part of what we need to do in our school system is we need to make sure that we are providing counselors, we're providing mental health support, we're providing more wraparound support for our kids, because, I think in some instances we have kids who don't have parents, who don't have, a family support system or network. I just think about the fact that I wanted to be a cheerleader so bad, but I didn't have money for the uniforms. So I pretended like I didn't want to be a cheerleader. But I think about, financial support should not be a barrier to a well-rounded public school education. And so making the right investments in young people now on the front end will, be significant as it relates to making sure that they are successful in the future. And it's why I'm invested in working with our school district. It's why I started a program called Opportunities for All, where we will, the city is committing to providing paid internship opportunities to all high school students in San Francisco starting in 9th grade. And so we're working with companies to provide slots for young people so that they can learn about all of the industries that exist in San Francisco at an early age, but they also can get paid, because that sometimes keeps a lot of kids from doing things they shouldn't to get money, especially kids who live in poverty. And so part of what I am trying to do is in being mayor, of course, you have to deal with the challenges that exist in San Francisco today, but what about the future? What about 10 years from now with the next generation of young people who are in our public schools? If we don't start focusing on them, making the right investments, providing the right support, and really focusing on those schools where we have a significant number of, unfortunately, low-performing students, then we are, we really are going to have more problems than we have even now in the future. So it is something that I'm definitely committed to, and it's going to continue to be a challenge because you have a school board, you have, a superintendent, but, the mayor's office does have a lot of, power to help support the schools. One of the things that I recently did when they cut ROTC at Galileo High School, my alma mater, and Mission High School, the kids came to me, and the Galileo kids came to me, And I was like, it was sad to see these kids, saying, we want this program, and I don't know why this, everything becomes political. They politicized ROTC, and, I helped to get some private resources, and so now ROTC is going back to Gal and Mission this fall, but, it shouldn't be that way, and we just have a lot of work to do with our public school system and a lot of changes that need to be made, but I'm committed to working with this leadership in order to make them better.
Thank you. Maybe we should take a few questions. Is there anything you wanted to say to us before that we haven't gotten to yet? So, okay. I do have another question.
I feel like I've been talking all day.
No. Yes, question over here.
You just mentioned that
We're being live webcast, so if you can wait for the microphone. Sure. Thank you.
I am a trustee for the Contra Costa Community College District, and I share your concerns about what will be happening to students. Are you working with the City College of San Francisco to have them help you, because there's a new state law called CCAP, College and Career Access Pathways, that enables colleges and schools to work much closely together?
Thank you for asking that question. I was going to ask about higher education also, but didn't get around to it.
Yeah, and the good news is I am, and City College provides opportunities where kids in high school can take courses and get credit, and that's definitely already happening. But I do meet with all of the different colleges that are here in San Francisco and have gotten them to commit to doing regular fairs in all of our high schools, because two of the things that I'm doing and working with the superintendent to do is, number one, consistently provide these kinds of resources to the school. So not just one time. So making sure that we have a day where we bring a lot of companies to a school for opportunities, and also schools, colleges. Yes, we can bring UC Berkeley and other places outside San Francisco, but we have Golden Gate University, San Francisco State University, scholarship opportunities, and so making sure that we have these various higher education institutions in our public schools on a regular basis. So I'm excited about what we're going to be doing in the near future. We already started with a school called Hilltop, and just to a few of those young women who are graduating, I'm so excited about some of the things they plan to do because of it, specifically with City College, and taking some of the classes that they have available and working at the same time. It's going to be absolutely incredible, but we have to make those direct connections, and so it's something I'm definitely committed to.
I think there was a question here.
Thank you, Mayor Breed, and thank you for recognizing the importance of homelessness and addressing that. I'm with Blue Shield of California, and we're very focused on all things that affect health, and that certainly is one of those issues. As you're trying new things, both in the homelessness space and trying to address things like education, what are you seeing as more opportunities for public-private partnerships to address these really complex issues?
I think a couple of things. Number one, opportunities for all. Is a perfect public-private partnership. Part of it is not just contributions that help pay for the internships, but also space in your organization. And it does require an orientation. It does require, some things that you would have to do, or someone within your company would have to do in order to prepare to work with young people, because we want to make sure that we set you up for success. And what that might mean in terms of working with someone who's a high school student, and in some instances a challenging high school student to work with, but we want you to give them a chance. And so that's one way. The other thing is I'm going to be looking to our health community for support for mental health stabilization beds, for a partnership, because I know that oftentimes like you provide contributions to organizations or community benefits if there's a new hospital opening or something to that effect, but providing health care for someone who is mentally ill, who needs a either permanent location, it takes a lot of work, a lot of resources, and so looking to our health community to help in that particular way. I mean, I can keep going if you want, but there's a lot. What's great about the city is there's a lot of opportunity to partner. And again, it's not just money. It's also providing your time and your resources, and maybe something that you already do, and in enhancing what you do to provide additional support for someone who might need it is something that we are happy to partner with you on to do.
We have a question up here.
Hi, my name is Terrell Gamble. I'm chair of San Francisco Achievers, which is a nonprofit program here for African American males. And I also sit on the board of retirement for Alameda County. But my question is about a statement that Kamala Harris made maybe a couple weeks ago about programs that are designed to sort of help African Americans, generally help 95% of all the population. So my question is, do you have any programs in your mind that's designed to help African American people?
So I think that most of the programs that we have, I mean, actually coming from the African American Art and Culture Complex, most of the programs that I put together are still in effect, and they were specifically targeted at African American kids in the community, and some of them are going really well. Project Level is a great program, Talent All-Stars, and a number of other programs that focus on the arts, but Project Level in particular focuses on the music industry and all the different aspects of the music industry, and it's been one of the most successful programs that we provide. As far as my administration, we focus on really funding a significant number of programs that serve communities that are mostly low income, which unfortunately consists primarily of a lot of African American communities in the Bayview Hunters Point and the Western Addition community. And so through the Department of Children, Youth and Families, we fund a lot of programs. And I'm familiar with your program, and in fact, one of my employees was a member, DeAnthony Jones. But if there's an interest in finding out a little bit more, we could provide you with a list. I will say that the challenge oftentimes that many of our nonprofit agencies have is, they really depend on the city funding that they get. And they spend a lot of time really focused on young people, and it's very time consuming. It makes it difficult for them to oftentimes fundraise from the private sector. And this is why it's so important, I believe, to make sure that organizations we know are effective in serving young people get the resources they need despite some of their capacity challenges, which continue to come up with their funding, but also opportunities for all. We want to make sure that payment for young people is not a barrier to having young people working within their various nonprofit agencies, which in most instances is the reason why the program is so successful in the first place. So it is something that we're focused on, and happy to provide you with a long list of various organizations if you want to connect with them.
There was a question over here.
You hold it. Hello. Thank you so much for being here. It's really inspiring to hear you speak in person, and I know it's an honor for all of us. I asked this question as a former middle school and high school teacher and administrator in the southeast of the city. Bayview, Viz Valley, Portola, and Excelsior District. You were speaking a lot about the need for opportunities for our high school kids, which I hear in such a huge way, and I really appreciate that, the ROTC, all that. Our kids need lots more, and the city is so rich in opportunity that we need to be connecting them. I also know, having worked in those schools, that a lot of times what we're trying to solve for is issues that should have been identified way earlier. It's like trying to solve cancer at stage 3 instead of preventing it by living a different lifestyle in the first place. And I know the governor is really pushing on early education, and I'm wondering how you think the policies coming from Sacramento are going to show up in San Francisco, and thoughts and opportunities about changing early education to make sure that we're setting kids up for success by starting earlier.
Yeah, and I will tell you, San Francisco invests a lot in early childhood education, and but it's still difficult to find teachers that can afford to live in San Francisco and work as preschool teachers in particular. And I think that part of when you talk about the Bayview, Hunters Point community and the schools there, I think one of the biggest issues that we have with the elementary schools and the junior high schools in particular is teacher retention, because sadly there are real challenges at these schools, and I am in the process of trying to figure out a way to incentivize more teachers to stay. And I know that there's a teachers union. There might be some challenges there with how this thing might work with the teachers union, but I just think that something's got to change to get more teachers to commit to staying longer in some of these places where they know that there are serious challenges, and getting more teachers who have seniority into those places, who have, real strong, a strong history in doing well in other places. So I think part of the issue with some of the challenges within our elementary and elementary and middle school is just really making sure that there is some level of consistency, that we have people there who are able to, work with young people who sometimes have a diverse number of challenges, providing mental health support, providing smaller classroom sizes. I mean, really, we know where the problems are, right? And we know when they start, but where is the support? And it's not just our public schools. It has to also be our community-based organizations and all of the things that the city, I will say, in terms of, the city has been really generous in terms of providing significant support to young people. And the question is, are we making the right investments? Are we spending the money wisely so that it impacts a young person in a positive way? Are we working with that kid from day one, knowing and identifying those obstacles, and just kind of really, wrapping our arms around that kid and following them through their experience so that we can ensure their success? And I think, there is a real need to change how we provide education, how we provide programmatic support, and there also has to be some level of accountability, because I don't think the way our systems are structured right now will change. I don't think anything will change. More money will not solve the problem. It's how we make the right investment to try and retain teachers and educators and other support systems in those areas where it's the most challenging. So I'm committed to doing it, and I may rub some of the teachers union folks the wrong way, but it's time to have that conversation now if we want to change it.
Mayor Breed, I want to ask you one other question, and then unfortunately we're out of time. So you're in a position now that Senator Feinstein was mayor of San Francisco, Governor Newsom was mayor of San Francisco. So people just naturally look to you for broader political leadership, and I'm wondering how you think about your role in the broader political arena today. And
well, first of all, if you're asking me, am I doing anything else right now? I'm just loving being mayor. I love San Francisco, and I can't even imagine living anyplace else in the world. And this is such a great city, and why would I want to be in Sacramento or Washington, D.C.? I mean, this is where you want to be, is in San Francisco. So I think part of, we have made a number of, bold statements. We've pushed a number of bold initiatives. We've proven that things could work and the world wouldn't come to an end. San Francisco has been just really a risk taker in so many different things that I think people look at this as it's a global city, and they look as the person who's responsible for it as mayor, as someone who, whose opinion matters, because I represent a global city. So I think that it's important to be responsible with what I say, even though sometimes I really want to say what I want to say, to make sure that I understand that it just kind of takes on a whole nother meaning sometimes, whether I meant to say it or not. But it requires a lot of responsibility, because if I'm representing the people of San Francisco, I have a responsibility that when there's an injustice to speak out, or when there's an issue to speak out, or to protect the people of the city, and to stand up against anyone who would try and attack us or take away our resources or make us feel like we're not included in the whole United States of America. We are, and we're not going anywhere. And we're going to continue to stand by our values and the things that we care about. Yes, we have challenges. Like any major city, we have challenges, but we can't allow those challenges, to cripple us and not continue to just really appreciate the beauty, the diversity, and what San Francisco is and how amazing it's been. I mean, I think about even my own personal experience. I mean, what kid would grow up in like the worst public housing units in the city and live there over 20 years of my life and then become mayor of the city? We have so many great things to be proud of. And so as we, see what we know are challenges that the rest of the country faces, as we deal with the challenges of homelessness and housing and transportation and all the things that we know we have a role to address, we still are really fortunate to live in such an incredible city. And I think that recently when the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce did a poll, even with all of our challenges, 64% of those people polled said they'd rather live in San Francisco than any place else in the world. So we got a lot to be proud of, and that means that we have a responsibility to the rest of the world to continue to push innovative policies, to show them how to do it right, and hopefully we'll continue to be a shining beacon for the rest of the world to follow.
Well, Mayor Breed, I really want to thank you so much for being with us at the Public Policy Institute of California today, taking time out of your busy schedule this afternoon to join us. And,
it was my lunchtime.
and I want to thank Marissa for joining us, and all of you for being part of our fantastic event this afternoon, and also our sponsors for making it possible for us to have this Speaker Series event, which will continue next week in Sacramento, where we have a program on the 2020 census that will be that we're having. Mayor Breed, best of luck with everything that you're doing. For all of you, have a wonderful afternoon. If you can, join us for coffee and dessert. You all deserve it. Thank you.